Hello YouTube, and welcome to the final installment of Dreams Behind the Scenes. In this video, I'll be taking you through the editing process of Dreams, breaking it down into kind of the different core elements of editing this project. We're going to do sound design, we're going to do pacing, we're going to do effects, and then we're going to do color grading. And I'm going to break it into those categories so that it's a little bit more streamlined. That way I'm not going through every single shot of every single scene. So it keeps this video a little more condensed, but also still gives you all of the fun behind the scenes information that you want. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Sound design was incredibly important for this film, and there's so much of it in the entire project. Just looking at the timeline, there's so many effects, there's so many sounds, so many things that I added in to really create a feeling and make it feel more, I don't know, complete. Sound design is one of those things that can really enhance a movie, and it can really enhance the production value of your projects. Getting sound right is incredibly important. So I'm gonna look at a couple examples here. The first one is the initial dream sequence in the garden. First off, I just wanna say this timeline is very messy. Don't follow my timeline organization. There is none, and I really need to work on that. So just bear with me with that, but I will try to make it as easy to view and understand as possible here. So one of the first things that I do with pretty much every scene in this film is I first lay down an ambient track behind everything, something that's going to be the atmosphere of the scene, something that's going to fill any of that dead space in between shots. So for this sequence in particular, I've got this jungle, rainforest, nature, background track. And by adding this kind of baseline ambience to the whole scene, it kind of helps tie things together. All of the shots have this kind of base level, I don't want to say white noise, because it's kind of what this is. It's kind of adding in a base level of noise to everything, so you never get moments where there's no audio and you're hearing nothing. But with a scene like this, you don't want to just add like basic white noise to it. You can add in this cool, ambient jungle, rainforest type sound, because that fits the scene. And then on top of that, I go through and I add in sound effects for each specific shot. All the audio in this scene is completely done in post. There was nothing that I used that was from the actual filming, because I didn't have a mic on my camera while I was filming this. So I had reference audio, but it was really bad and unusable. And so I went in and replaced all of it, because it just sounds way better and you can really control the audio. And that's what a lot of things are about in film, is just having control over what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like. I then also had a music track, which is also very helpful. Also another good style of ambience in a way, but also obviously you can edit the scene to it. There's a lot more you can do with music than just it being the ambience of the scene. One technique I really like to use is going from really loud sound to really quiet sound. And I use that a couple of times in the sequence, and I really like how it kind of focuses the viewer in again. When you go from this really loud to quieter, something in your brain just kind of clicks, and you're like, oh, that you notice it on kind of a subconscious level, and I think it really helps focus the viewer back in. So for a shot like this, for example, where I really want just to focus on the fish, I make sure that I keep the audio levels down and keep them lower. That way, again, the visuals are what's more in focus. And it's all this kind of dance, this balance of what do I want the viewer to be focusing on? Do I want them to be focused on the music in this moment, or do I want them to be focusing on the visuals? And it's finding that balance and finding what needs to be highlighted and how can I highlight that. Now this scene is a perfect example of using ambience only and just having a scene that is quiet without being too quiet and too awkward. For this sequence, there was, again, no real audio or sounds on set because I'm literally just staring out a window. So there's no sound to it. So how do you add sound when there's no sound? Especially in a sequence like this. With the dream sequence, you could look at that and go, okay, there's obvious sound that should be added in. But for something like this, what do you do? So what I decided to do is add in 2 layers of ambience to this. Making sure the viewer doesn't feel awkward in those quiet moments and making sure there's just enough audio, just enough for the viewer to listen to keep the scene flowing and to keep it from being just dead silent is very, very important. One of the tricky parts of the sound design of this film was the slow motion sequences, because slow motion sound effects can be a little tricky. How do you make something sound slower? You can, typically speaking, slow down the audio in an editing software, but usually that doesn't sound quite right. So what I found worked the best was sometimes to slow it down a bit if you needed to, but using EQ to muffle the audio. And that seems to be kind of the trick that a lot of movies use to create slow motion sound effects. Now here's a scene where I did use on-set audio, but I also enhanced that. So we've got on this top track here, that's where we have the actual audio that was recorded on the day. But then I also added in a layer of ambience, and the reason for this is because it helps blend together different shots. Because going from this shot to this shot, the audio is just going to sound a little bit different sometimes, and sometimes there's just a noise in the background that just sounds different, and it doesn't perfectly line up. So when you add a layer of ambience underneath all of the audio, it really helps make it sound very cohesive and flow together. Now I also added in, this is a little secret that I'm going to show right now, or share right now, but the sound of the doves in this scene, that was added in post, and it wasn't on the day. It was a sound that I really felt was necessary for the scene. I feel like it's a common thing, you know, the noise of these doves specifically, that's such a, I don't know, it just brings you back to your childhood and these simpler times, and just that feeling in the morning when, you know, the world kind of hasn't woken up yet and there's just the birds chirping outside, and just that specific dove was something I really wanted to add in for this scene. And so I did, and that was, again, not something that was in the shots initially. It was something that I added in. I found the sound effect. I think I found this one on YouTube, actually. And yeah, I found it for free and added it in. Just very quiet, very subtle in the background, but it added a little bit extra to the experience of the film. Now, there wasn't really a whole lot of special effects in this project. This is probably one of the least effect-intensive projects I've done, especially after The Doorway. That one was the most I've ever done, so it was kind of nice to not have to do too much with this one. But there was a couple, and so I want to talk about those right now. Obviously, I think the most prominent one, most obvious one, is the trash can. And this was achieved from a multitude of techniques that started on set and then was also stuff that I did in editing. So this right here is the original shot that I filmed. And as you can see, there's a light here on the ground, and that was what was giving the nice lighting on the whole scene and really helped make the fire feel real. The light that I was using had this effect that does kind of make it flicker, and so you get that nice, you know, flickering flame effect. So then obviously the next step is to paint out the light, and I just did that in Photoshop, just using the clone stamp and some of the generative fill to remove that, and then added on the trash can back into the shot, and then finally you add in the fire, and to blend it all together, add a little glow to the fire. And the glow with the fire is just duplicating the layer. So as you can see here, I've got 2 layers of the fire. So I duplicated the layer, and then I just added a Gaussian blur to it. And I think I also, yeah, and then I changed the blend mode to screen. So just duplicate the layer, add a blur to it, change the blend mode to screen or add, either one works. And that just kind of gives the fire a little bit more of that glow that I was looking for. Overall, this effect really wasn't anything crazy. It's just lighting on set, add in some fire, add in, you know, put some fire in the dumpster, but a lot of the lighting is doing kind of the heavy lifting of this effect, and that's what made it so easy. Okay, so this effect, it's very simple. It is just a standard cloning effect. It is nothing crazy. There's probably a million tutorials online on how to do a cloning effect, and pretty much all it is masking. And so if we look at this, if I disable the mask on this layer, we can see the shot that was actually filmed before the mask was added on, before the effect was added on. And so pretty much to do this shot, you just film the shot twice. So we have this shot that we film, and then you film the second shot laying on the ground, and then you go in post, and you just add a little mask, cut out one part of the frame, and then boom, you've got a really easy cloning effect. Now, one thing again, this goes back to lighting. Lighting is key in visual effects. The lighting of the scene, as you can see, there's a shadow on me, and as I walk forward, that shadow also moves forward. That's why, in these shots, my dad was standing in, because his shadow is what you're seeing in these shots, not, obviously, my own shadow, because I couldn't, yeah, that's not possible. I can't cast a shadow on myself, you know. So having someone stand in here really helped add just a little bit of an extra touch to this effect, because you have that shadow and because you have that interaction between the two characters, essentially. There you go. It's nothing special. It's just masking. That's all it is. It's masking and lighting. Those are the 2 biggest things, and that made these effects look so good. Now on to color, which is one of my favorite parts of editing, and it really helps to just polish the footage and make it look like it's really a movie, you know? So the first example I want to look at is these nighttime shots here, and getting this look and kind of making it dark, but not to the point where you can't see anything. If we look at what I filmed on set, this is before the color grading, this is before anything was added to it. We can see that it is actually brighter. I did make it darker in post, and that's a big thing to note when you're filming. If you're doing a night scene, it is always easier to drop the exposure down typically in post than it is to raise it up. And what that's going to do as well is the more light you have in a scene, the brighter it is, the sharper the image is going to be, the less noise there's going to be in the image, and it's overall just going to look better. So if you're filming a night scene, especially when you can't really overexpose the image, it's always better, and in this situation where I can control the light, it's always better to raise the light up a little bit while you're filming and then drop it down in post, because you're gonna get a sharper, crisper looking image. So with this, there's not a whole lot going on. It looks like a lot, but it's mostly just adding contrast and desaturating the image. So you can kind of see, this is where this is the actual color grading. This final node where it says look, that is the actual color grading. And you can see it's not doing much. It's a very minor tweak. It's a very subtle difference. But there's already so many other things that happen before that that contribute to the look. Contrast is a big one. We leave contrast right here. There's a good noticeable shift there. I also added this vignette to basically bring down the exposure of everywhere else but where I am. So if you can see this mask right here, it's helping to keep me at the same exposure, but then bring down the surrounding environment, again, to keep the clarity of the image and to make it not too dark, but then, again, still make it feel like it's night, because it is supposed to be dark, but you don't want it to be too dark. So it's a good balance there. And masking in color is another thing that is very, very helpful, especially when you're trying to direct the viewer's eye to a specific point. And then we, of course, have the second dream sequence, and this is one where color is used in a bigger way, where I'm taking basically the same footage and color grading it differently so that it feels like you're in the same environment, but it's a different feeling, and things have changed. If we look at the original footage, this is kind of in the shade. It's not direct sunlight. And I am doing a lot here. There's a lot going on. There's some effects that I was adding on to it. But if we look at just the look, just the color aspect of it, gonna say, I love the color warper inside of DaVinci. I feel like it is one of the most convenient tools sometimes, because it just allows you to warp and pull the colors where you want them. And so for a scene like this, where I said I really want it to be cold, I want it to be blue, I'm gonna use the color wheels. I'm gonna use the color wheels to do that, but then I'm also going to use the color warper to kind of desaturate certain areas of the image to get it to look the way that I want it to. I could go on and on about the color warper, but it would kind of be a boring video. So let's stick to the fun stuff here. It's really just about knowing what you want and knowing what is the feeling of the scene, what is the mood I'm trying to convey, and how can I convey that. A big thing that helps is using reference images. So I want to look at these desert sequences because these heavily inspired by Dune, heavily inspired by Dune, and this shot in particular is a great example of that. So I really wanted it to look like that opening sequence in Dune where it's the eclipse and it's that super, super rich orange color. So if we look at the original shot here, this is a completely normal shot. So all of the look, all of the style in this comes from the color grading, comes from the editing. So this is the footage just with an exposure adjustment, just giving it some contrast. So again, this is still very normal looking desert footage. This is pretty much what it would look like straight out of the camera, just with a little bit of adjustment. And then by adjusting the color and really skewing the color temperature, you can make it a lot warmer. Not quite where I wanted it yet, but getting there. And then I also specifically made an adjustment to the sky, because when I originally did it and I added in this look, the ground looks good, but the sky is still blue and you're getting this color contrast that I didn't really want. I wanted a very like monochrome look. And so I used these curves here to select the color of the sky and basically just remove the blue from it. And just remove enough until it looked and kind of matched with the ground. And so again, it can take this and turn it into this. And that's kind of the power of color grading. And you're not gonna be able to achieve this look on every camera, on every scene, because lighting does play a huge factor. And that's why in the scenes leading up to this, if we look at the color grading of these scenes, as we can see, the lighting on set is already kind of warm. And if we take away this, so this is just adding contrast. This is just adding, some contrast and a little bit of an exposure adjustment. That's it. And then it's just tweaking the color again, using my favorite color warper right here, and just taking the orange and making it more orange, essentially. But this is entirely motivated by what's on set. And the reason that I'm able to adjust the color so much in a shot like this versus in any other shot is because you're kind of working with neutral lighting in a sense. When you're working with daylight, a lot of the times it's very neutral. Cloudy days are perfect for really extreme adjustments like this. There are some scenarios where you can pull off these extreme looks and others where you can't, and it all depends on the lighting of the scene. Now this scene, as simple as it seems, was decently tricky and was another one where I used a reference image to find the look and to really make it look as good as possible. So if we look at it here, this is what I was working with after I did all of my exposure adjustments and got it to where I wanted it to. And I was really trying to figure out, how do I take this image? First of all, it looks pretty good, but it looks a little flat, it looks a little bland. How do you take this and make it look as though it's in a movie? Well, the easiest way is to actually make it look like a movie that you've seen. And I found this shot from Top Gun Maverick that matched this specific scene and the lighting of the scene very well. And I just used that as a reference and matched my shot to that shot. And I felt like it really gave it this rich look that made it feel not just like some random average footage. It made it feel and look more like a movie. When you're looking at any reference image, make sure that it matches the footage that you're working with, because if you're trying to match a daytime shot to a nighttime shot, it's not gonna work. Like, it's just, you're not gonna be able to get the same colors. You have to be working with stuff that matches what you are already trying to, compare it to. It's kind of, you're setting yourself up for failure if you're not using shots that are similar when it comes to lighting, when it comes to composition, when it comes to time of day, when it comes to location. You're setting yourself up for failure, and that's why I think a lot of these color grades worked. The Dune one, we're in the desert, so the Dune color grade has got to work for that. And then the other shot that I showed, they're very, very similar to the ones in Top Gun, lighting-wise and look-wise. And so it's just about finding the images that look similar to what you're looking at, and really just looking at movies that you've seen before and movies that you liked, and taking inspiration from those. So the pacing of editing is incredibly important, and it's really what can make or break a movie. If the pacing is off, if it feels weird, if it doesn't feel natural, the movie can feel weird and unnatural, and there's no flow or rhythm to it. With this film, it was a little bit interesting with the pacing because I edited a lot of the scenes individually. And so I didn't know how it was all gonna fit together until later on in the process. And what I found was that there is a lot of different pacing, but it worked. So if we look at the start of the film, and we look at the individual shots, so all these lines here that you see, those are cuts. That's how many times it cut. And if we look at this first half a little bit closer, there's a lot of cuts. The average shot length is not very long. Some shots hang for a little bit longer here, but for the most part, there's a lot of sequences with a lot of fast cuts, and the pace of the edit is very, very fast. And it's like that pretty much until this sequence right here. And this is where things change for a little bit, and we can see that this whole sequence has these not very many shots, and it's got these shots that you hang on for a long time, and the shot length sits, and we sit in these moments, and we sit in these longer shots, and it really contrasts well with the earlier parts of the movie where it was very fast-paced. What this really helps is it helps the audience feel the pace of the movie and the pace of things slowing down for the character. The editing in this, in my opinion, the best editing that I've ever done, because it utilizes pacing in a way that I really haven't utilized it before. We look at this scene. Look at the dance sequence is a perfect example. It is a very fast, very hyper-edited sequence, and then only 2 minutes later, we've got one of the slowest sequences in the entire movie. And yes, it does speed up a little bit here, and there's moments where it kind of tries to speed up, but that's intentional. We have this scene where the character is reflecting on a moment that they had, and kind of having this quiet, peaceful, slow moment with themselves. And so the editing reflects that. It's slow, the shots are long, and it holds on things for much longer. There's not a lot of different angles it's just very simple, and you feel that. And then in the scene that follows, you kind of feel the character pushing against that, pushing against this slow, relaxed, like thinking about stuff, essentially. It's the character wanting to speed things up, and that's reflected then in the workout scene where he's working out, he's doing all these things constantly, but at the end of the workout scene, what do we get? This really long shot, a couple cuts here, but then two decently long shots as well. This one in particular I really want to focus on because this is, again, a little bit longer than you usually would hold on a shot, and it just helps to really make the audience realize that, like, this is a moment. This is a time where this character is thinking about something we don't know entirely what, and that's up for you to decide. That's up for you to think about. But it's these slower moments, and it's these moments where we just let the sequence breathe, and we let the audience breathe, that can really help humanize and connect us to the character, because the pacing of the editing, especially in a movie where you don't have dialogue, and you can't have the characters talk about how they're feeling, the editing hugely influences how the audience feels about the scene, and then their perception of the character, and in turn, what they think the character is thinking about and how they're feeling. And so by changing the pace of the scenes in the first half to the second half, it really helps to show the audience, okay, there's a change going on here, and the main character is going from this very fast-paced, like, life is getting thrown at him, and there's so many things going on, and he's trying to, in a lot of ways, avoid his problems and avoid, thinking about them. And then anytime that it does slow down, and anytime there is a moment to breathe, you really feel that. And then we get this sequence where, again, it follows that trend of these longer takes. And as we can see, especially, just look at this sequence. Look at how long some of these shots are held for, and it really just helps the audience sit with the scene and connect with the main character and feel his perception of time, his perception of reality right now, because sometimes it's how it is. Sometimes time feels like it's sped up. Sometimes it feels like life is happening in a million miles an hour, and there's other times where it's slowed down and you're really having these more intimate moments and having these moments of, reflection and just thinking, and it's just beautiful. And I was super happy that I was able to represent that through the editing and through the pacing of the editing. And then one thing I really like is the final sequence is, in my mind, a bit of both. You get some longer shots, but it's not too long, and yet there's still a lot of different shots, there's a lot of different angles, there's a lot of stuff going on, but it doesn't feel too fast, it doesn't feel too slow, and so we go from the start of the film, where you've got these fast-paced edits, to the middle of the film, where things have kind of changed and you slow down and you allow the audience to feel that shift. And then by the end of it, it's kind of found its rhythm, and it's reflective of the character finding his own rhythm and finding his own path, and finally kind of figuring out what he needs to do to get past what he's going through. And with that being said, that is all I have for you today. This is the final installment. This is going to be a long video. I can already tell I haven't started editing it. I know this is going to be long. It's going to be beefy, but I'm super excited about it because there's a lot of different elements. I could have talked for probably twice as much time if I went into full detail on every little thing, but I hope this gives a good overview and a good idea of all the things that went into the editing of this film. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now.